Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Tyler Daye, who is the Policy and Civic Engagement Coordinator for Common Cause North Carolina, and who was also the author, one of the authors on our redistricting reform piece that's in our Blueprint Policy Report, our Blueprint Report 2025, that has a bunch of amazing policy recommendations for preserving democracy in North Carolina. And so obviously we're in this moment where redistricting is a huge issue. So I wanted to kind of collab with him and do a little interview and sort of get a sense of what the state is of redistricting right now, and also talk a little bit more about like maybe how the reforms in the report could be impactful in this moment. So obviously, Tyler, right now we are in this kind of really extra gerrymandering battle that's happening like all across the country. All of these different states are pretty much intentionally saying we are intentionally politically gerrymandering our maps to directly affect the outcomes of the 2026 election. That's sort of why they're doing this. And obviously places like California are involved, Texas is involved, and now this has come to North Carolina. And North Carolina is now part of this sort of arms race of gerrymandering that's happening. So the one first thing I wanted to ask you is, how did we get into this situation? What are the circumstances that made it such that we are in a world where we have all these states saying we are going to intentionally politically gerrymander our maps, which is something, I think that isn't really acceptable to most of the public most of the time.
I think that that is an excellent question. And uh, you could write a book on how we've gotten to where we are. There's so much to talk about, but really, I think one of the things that really has gotten us to where we are is the 2019 case Common Cause v. Rucho.
Hmm.
So that was a case out of North Carolina in which Common Cause, along with other plaintiffs, sued the state legislature over claims that their districts were partisan gerrymanders and that violated the U.S. Constitution. So that was a case in which legislators said point blank that they were drawing partisan gerrymanders. There is a clip on our YouTube channel of former Representative David Lewis saying that, I propose that we draw the maps to give an 11-3 Republican advantage because I do not believe it is possible or I'm sorry, 10-3 Republican advantage because I don't believe it's possible to draw an 11-2 advantage. Um, I mean, he literally said that
Yeah.
during a committee meeting and so it was very clear. He's saying, yeah, we're drawing this for partisan gain, and so we took them to court, and the case went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2019 that partisan gerrymandering is bad.
Hmm.
It's really bad for the country. It's bad for representation, but they said that they could not do anything about it, and that um, it was not something that could be adjudicated in federal court, and that it would be something that could be worked on at the state level, but
Hmm.
that states may rule differently, but at the federal level, they effectively permitted it
Hmm.
with their ruling in Common Cause v. Rucho. So fast forward, 2019, that happens. We have a census in 2020, and of course, after every census, we redistrict. So 2021 was a redistricting year, and the state legislature here in North Carolina redrew our districts, our congressional and state legislative districts, and they once again drew partisan gerrymanders.
Hmm.
And this time, we at Common Cause and other plaintiffs sued once again, but this time we did so in state court because the U.S. Supreme Court told us before we're not taking this anymore, but you can go to state court, and state courts can rule differently. So that's exactly what we did. And we had a trial, and that case ultimately went all the way up to the North Carolina Supreme Court. And
Hmm.
in 2022, the North Carolina Supreme Court ruled that partisan gerrymandering violated North Carolina's state constitution,
Hmm.
and they outlawed partisan gerrymandering in the state. So that was a big win for us.
Hmm.
Um, However, and I should note that resulted in a map because
Hmm.
um, that year they ended up drawing, the state courts ended up drawing a map after they gave the legislature an attempt to fix their gerrymander. The legislators did not do so, and so state courts had to step in, and we ended up getting a congressional map that year that elected 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats,
Hmm.
which is pretty reflective of the purple nature of what is, I think one of the most tightly contested battleground states in the country.
Hmm.
Yeah, so a big win for us in 2022. But later that year, we had elections for North Carolina Supreme Court, and the power on the court changed. So there had been a Democratic majority on the state Supreme Court, and
Hmm.
Republicans took control, took a majority on the state Supreme Court in after the 2022 elections.
Hmm.
And after that happened, the state legislature, recognizing the change in power on the court, petitioned the court to rehear our case from
Yeah.
2022, which had ruled that partisan gerrymandering was illegal.
Hmm.
And in what was practically unprecedented, uh,
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not aware of the history here, but
Yeah.
the state Supreme Court said we are going to rehear this case. None of the facts had changed in the case. The
Yeah.
only thing that had changed was who was on the court. And in 2023, they reheard the case and they ruled the opposite way. They said that partisan
Yeah.
gerrymandering is permissible in the state of North Carolina. And so that is why now
Hmm.
legislators like Senator Ralph Hayes, who drew this latest congressional map,
Hmm.
are able to blatantly say, yes, we're doing this for partisan gain. And, um, and I think it's very troubling. And yeah, I mean, I think that, um, it was certainly the wrong decision by our state Supreme Court. It was the wrong decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, but it shows you the power that
Hmm.
our state and federal courts have
Hmm.
when it comes to this. And you know, ultimately, we really do need, I think, a sweeping solution that will ban partisan gerrymandering in this state and nationwide.
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, I actually also used to work on redistricting myself, and I remember I had just sort of left that work when sort of the state Supreme Court changed hands and this happened, and I remember being so shocked that they would do something that was so clearly just outside of the norm for like these legal processes in the first place. That there was sort of this brazenness to it that was, yeah, that was really disturbing, like you said, troubling. So just and I think you gave such a great historical perspective, and just to dig in maybe a little bit more, North Carolina has a really long history of political and racial gerrymandering from like kind of the earliest days in a way. So many of the major legal cases in this country around gerrymandering and redistricting have come out of North Carolina because we've just been such a ground zero for this issue. And so this has been going on for a long time. So, right, you're talking about these developments that have happened sort of since 2019, which have really changed the environment. But obviously, this has been a long-standing problem in North Carolina. And I'm wondering, why do you think that, this was never addressed before, right? There was 100 years of this happening before 2019, before 2023. So why do you think North Carolina has this sort of reluctance to deal with this issue?
Yeah. Well, you know, for decades, uh, the whichever party that's in power
Hmm.
has had the power to draw our congressional and state legislative districts in North Carolina. So one of the things that is unique about North Carolina is that the state legislature has all the power here. In many states, in most states, the governor has the power to veto
Hmm.
the maps. So that can act as a check on the legislative branch in some situations.
Hmm.
But in our state, the governor has no such power. And so the only check that there is the courts. And so it's an inherent conflict of interest to have legislators drawing their own districts and drawing districts to support people in their political party. I mean, I have, you know, to me, I can't think of a bigger conflict of interest in our government.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't tell, we don't allow students to create their own tests,
Hmm.
you know. But that's what we're doing here essentially. And so, with there being such a conflict of interest there, it is very tempting for the party in power to just simply gerrymander. There's nothing stopping them. And, at this point, state courts have said, yeah, well, this is permissible. Partisan gerrymandering, that is, racial gerrymandering is still illegal.
Hmm.
But partisan gerrymandering is permissible. So, um, it's just I think too tempting, and it's like, well, there's nothing stopping us, so we might as well continue to do it. But I think that is why North Carolina in particular has had such a history. It's um, you know like I said, the combination of the conflict of interest, which is the case in all the states where state legislatures draw the maps, but also not having, the governor, uh,
Hmm.
having the ability to veto. So all that power is with the state legislature. And then the other thing as well is that, um, when we talk about pushing for reforms, like an independent redistricting commission, which we talk about in the report, uh, one of the things that's unique about us in North Carolina is we don't have citizen-initiated referendums, which means that citizens don't have the ability to put collect petition signatures and get a reform on the ballot. So in places like Michigan, where they have an independent commission, they were able to do this because they collected thousands of petition signatures to get a ballot reform measure to do it, to get that on the ballot. It went before Michigan voters, and Michigan voters overwhelmingly supported it. I have no doubt, based upon polling that we have seen for many years in this state, people really don't like gerrymandering. And I have no doubt that if we had that ability to collect petition signatures and get a reform measure on the ballot, that it would pass overwhelmingly. So there are a lot of headwinds, unfortunately, in this state that make it more difficult for us. And I will just point out one fun fact that I think just really illustrates the point. As I said, both parties have done this. Democrats did it when they were in power, and when Democrats were doing it, you know, they were against redistricting reform. They didn't see it as an issue. But the current leader of the Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger, in 2009, he was not the leader of the Senate. He was in the minority.
Hmm.
At that time, he supported an independent commission bill. You can look it up. It's on the General Assembly
Hmm.
website, the Horton Independent Redistricting Commission bill, and his name is right there on it. Um, at that time, Democrats were not supportive of it.
Yeah.
He was. So, and now it has changed. So I liken it to a game of musical chairs,
Hmm.
essentially, that we play, where the party in power says, "Oh, the system's fine. We don't need to do anything." And the party that's out of power is ready to change the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that that is so telling, right? That there it's for a lot of these politicians, it's not a matter of principle, it's a matter of whether or not they're, drawing the maps. So just to go, because you mentioned the redistricting reform article that's in the Blueprint report, maybe we could talk about that a little bit because, obviously the report is there to kind of provide a positive vision for what's possible in, democracy in North Carolina. And so can you talk to me a little bit now that we've sort of set the ground and told us the history and our current situation? Can you tell me a little bit about, what the reforms in the article would do to kind of help prevent the very extreme gerrymandering we're seeing now?
Sure. So, our reform that we are advocating for is an independent redistricting commission. And so it would be made up of an equal number of Republicans, Democrats, and those not affiliated with either of the two major political parties. Um, because right now, unaffiliated voters or voters of third parties don't have any representation when it comes to the redistricting process. So um, the commission would be made up of citizens, not politicians. So you wouldn't be able to be a lobbyist and be on this commission. And we have several uh, stipulations that would count you out from being on the commission if you had conflicting interests with legislators.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so that's really the notion here is that we have citizens, not politicians. We don't have a majority of any political party on the commission, and also they would be outlawed, forbidden from drawing partisan gerrymanders. They would be required to take into account communities of interest,
Mhm.
which to me should be the number one thing that we're looking at.
Mhm.
After equal population, obviously the districts have to be equal. Obviously, the districts need to comply with the Voting Rights Act, and so forth. But to me, after those legal requirements, that the number one thing that a district should do is to comprise a community, a local community.
Mhm.
And our current districts don't do that. I'm in a district with the good folks in Boone.
Mhm.
Um, I live in Greensboro,
Yeah.
and I love Boone. I love the mountains in North Carolina, but that is not a local community. It's
Mhm.
a good 100 miles away. And the reason why we're paired in a district together is because of the fact that they're drawing these districts to split up communities because they're prioritizing partisan gain.
Mhm.
So communities of interest would be a requirement that they take that into account. And one of the things I really like about um, the bill, and it's Senate Bill 698 that we reference in the article, and also House Bill 20. Both of them are bills that would implement independent redistricting commissions. One of the things I really like about it is that it requires that the commission provide a written account after they draw the districts of how they listened to public comment and complied with communities of interest
Mhm.
and keeping minority groups together to ensure that historically marginalized groups that have been targeted by gerrymandering countless times in the past are being adequately represented and represented, how they asked to be represented through the public comments. So this is just a sea change, um, compared to what we do now. So just to recap, basically, what we do now is um, politicians in the General Assembly, and we say it's the state legislature that draws the maps. it's not really the state legislature that draws the maps. It is state legislative leaders, a small group. And in the case of the last redistricting, according to committee testimony, it was only Senator Ralph Hise
Hmm.
that drew the map that we got. So it's there are very few people that are involved in that process, um, and there are certain things they have to follow. Yes, the districts have to be of equal population. They have to comply with the Voting Rights Act, um, although there are concerns about
Hmm.
its longevity. With I know that there's a case pending with the U.S. Supreme Court, so they're concerned about that. But currently, they have to comply with the Voting Rights Act.
Hmm.
Um, but and the districts have to be contiguous, meaning that they have to be connected. Um, but beyond that, they are free to use whatever criteria they want. There's nothing stopping them from drawing partisan gerrymanders. There's nothing that requires them to keep communities together or to consider municipalities um, when they draw these districts. So they are the ones drawing them. They get to decide how the maps are drawn, and they ultimately are the ones that pass these maps. This select group of legislative leaders in the General Assembly. Um, and the way that it would work with an independent commission is, again, citizens, not politicians, people that don't have a conflict of interest would be drawing these maps. You wouldn't have people, all the people being of one party. You'd have to have an equal number of Republicans, Democrats, and those not affiliated with either of the two major parties. It's an odd numbered commission as well at 15. So that way that prevents there being gridlock. And then they would be banned from drawing partisan gerrymanders. They'd have to take into account citizen input, communities of interest, and so forth. And then they would be the ones that actually decide on what the final maps are. So again, a sea change
Yeah.
compared to what we do now and what we have done in the state for ever, really, for decades.
Yeah, it would be a huge change, and a huge change for the good, right? Because I think that, like you're saying, what most people feel frustrated about in these maps are obviously they don't like the fact that politicians are drawing these maps to their own personal advantage. But like you were saying, also people don't feel represented by these maps. These maps do not reflect the communities that they live in. And to kind of go off of that, obviously this new map that's been that Ralph Hise drew, um, did make a major change in that respect because there's this long-standing Congressional District 1 in sort of the northeast of North Carolina, and that was drastically changed by this map. And I was wondering if you talked to me a little bit about what is the sort of historical significance of that sort of district, that region, that area in general, and why is this such a huge and consequential change?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So, uh, Congressional District 1 has historically represented what is called the Black Belt of North Carolina. So, that's an area in northeast North Carolina where there's a high Black voting age population. And it includes counties like Northampton, Halifax, Nash and Edgecombe, and Martin and Bertie. Um, and so that part of the state, like I said, it has a high Black voting age population. And one of the things that we're concerned about is that in places like this, when you have what's called racially polarized voting, which means that minority voters vote for different candidates
Mhm.
than white voters in the same area, it creates a situation in which minority voters are not able to elect candidates of their choice.
Mhm.
And uh, Congressional District 1, I should note that the map that was in effect, that had been in effect until this latest redraw, had already chipped away a little bit of the Black voting age population of the previous
Hmm.
district by adding in counties like Currituck
Hmm.
and Camden out in the far eastern, northeastern part of the state. Those are counties that have a very low black voting age population. Those were added in, and that already diluted the black voting age population of the district some. But what they did now is they really severely diluted it by adding in a portion of the more southeastern part of the state, going all the way really into the southeastern Outer Banks,
Hmm.
places like Emerald Isle
Hmm.
and Morehead City are now in the same district as the Black Belt with places like Rocky Mount um, and Halifax County and that whole Black Belt region. So the effect essentially is that the black voting age population of the district has gone down by about 8%.
Hmm.
And it's going to make it a lot more difficult for black voters in that part of the state to elect a candidate of their choice. And we do have data from the last election, the 2024 presidential election, that showed that black voters overwhelmingly
Hmm.
chose different candidates for Congress
Hmm.
uh, um, and for president compared to white voters in the same region.
Hmm.
And so, again, this really, I think, goes to the heart of the Voting Rights Act and why
Yeah.
it's so important, and the importance of, again, having districts
Hmm.
that are drawn in ways that make it possible for
Hmm.
minority voters to have their voices heard. Because if you don't have a district that's drawn in a way that does that, then these minority voters,
Hmm.
by they are minorities, and that's in the name that there are fewer of them than white voters. Then what happens is they never have their voices heard. They're always going to be drowned out.
Hmm.
And so this district really just dismantles. Again, the previous district chipped away at it some. There were
Hmm.
already concerns, and this new one just completely obliterates basically
Yeah.
the ability for black voters in that part of the state to elect a candidate of their choice.
Yeah, and I think, for people who are familiar with North Carolina geography at all, right? You saying you in Greensboro are in a district with people in Boone, that is wild. And I have family in Halifax County in Roanoke Rapids, and just thinking of them being in the same district as Emerald Isle is just wild to think about, if you know anything about North Carolina. So kind of to go on from that, obviously your organization, Common Cause North Carolina, recently announced that they are going to be suing after these over these new congressional maps. And, what kind of outcome are you hoping to see from that case?
Yeah. Well, I should note that this is a continuation. We never got a ruling on our previous case because
Hmm.
we had sued the legislature over their 2023 maps,
Hmm.
which um, they also drew mid-decade and um, purely for partisan gain.
Yeah.
Um, but this is really an addendum to that with the new maps the new map I should say that they've drawn at the congressional level. And I am hopeful that the courts will see everything that I've talked about, that um, this is what we're doing here is dismantling the ability for voters to be heard, to be represented, and be heard as communities.
Hmm.
And when legislators are, one of the things that I think that is uniquely significant about what we're dealing with now is that legislators are changing these districts in relation to the latest election data,
Hmm.
Senator Hayes talked about how, even specifically, how they moved Congressional District 1 from a district that in which 51% of the voters there voted for Trump to a district where now 55% of the voters voted for Trump in the 2024 election.
Hmm.
And um, you know, basically, if we're allowing I mean, it's already bad enough that legislators have the ability to draw partisan gerrymanders,
Hmm.
um, at the beginning of each decade after the U.S. Census. But if we are going to allow them
Hmm.
to fine tune these districts anytime they want to,
Yeah.
because that's what we're talking about here. We're saying, I mean, they're just doing this in the middle of the decade and now using even more precise data from the last election to shut out voters. They saw how the districts performed in 2024 and they said, "Oh, that district, that's a competitive one, District 1, let's exit out so it's not competitive anymore."
Hmm.
Um, if they're allowed to do this, then I mean, I just think that it goes to the heart of, um, again, what a representative democracy is all about, and it it violates the ability for voters to be heard, and it's retaliatory against voters. It's saying, "Hey, we don't like the way you voted. We're going to
Hmm.
move you around."
Yeah.
So that you don't have a chance to elect candidates that you want to elect anymore. I mean, that's retaliation, really, against voters, and I hope that that the court will see that and see the dangerous precedent. I think that this type of mid-decade redrawing does.
Hmm.
So yeah, we'll see.
Well, Tyler, I really want to thank you for talking to me today. This was so informative. You're so knowledgeable. You're so passionate. You have really great analogies. Um, and so I appreciate this. We're in this moment where, again, yet again, redistricting is coming up. And just to both be able to hear from you about exactly what's happening, to have that historical background from you, but also just to have this sort of counterpart positive vision of what redistricting could look like in North Carolina is just really inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yes. If I could just say one
Go
thing,
ahead,
Mika,
go ahead.
I just want to say, um, you do have power to act as a check. And in this state, our congressional districts and state legislative districts, obviously they've been gerrymandered. We've talked about that. But state legislative districts, excuse me, statewide elections cannot be gerrymandered because everybody in the state gets to vote on them. And we have had a history in this state, as we talked about, we're a purple state. We've had many elections that have come down to a very small number of votes. And that includes the last Supreme Court race, which was decided by 734 votes.
Hmm.
And we had in 2020 a Supreme Court race decided by 401 votes.
Yes.
It's two state Supreme Court races decided by hundreds of votes. This is out of over 5 million votes cast. So, what I would tell people, if you're thinking about, well, what can I do? The long-term goal is for an independent redistricting commission. We've outlined that in the report, but I would highly encourage you to vote and to recognize that your vote for um, state Supreme Court justices and state court judges in general can provide a check on this system. If you don't believe that state courts should be allowing partisan gerrymandering, then you do have an ability to affect that through your vote. So I would just point that out. And again, knowing how close our races have been, every single vote really does matter in a state that is so highly contested. And again, th those races cannot be gerrymandered since they're statewide races.
Well, I think that that's a wonderful message to end on. Knowing that there are very consequential elections coming next year. And we're going to have another state Supreme Court election next year. So people have the power to impact these issues and need to be paying attention. So again, thank you so much, Tyler. I really appreciate your time.